This is Burn the Manual, brought to you by DeNovo Digital. We're here to light it up.
Here we're rewriting the rules of business, branding, and culture. No cliches, no business speak, just real insights. If you've ever thought there's a better way to do this, there is. Let's get into the marketing funnel.
The marketing funnel, yeah.
Yeah.
I know. You already know my. We're going to talk about, I guess, the growth loop, the flywheel / the marketing funnel.
Nick is still a staunch believer in the traditional marketing funnel.
Yeah, I mean, I want to caveat that because that makes me sound like I didn't understand the argument for the new ideas, but which I do, but tell me why you think that it's old.
I think it's old mainly because of creation and what's changed over the past 10 years, right? We're now looking at an audience of people from a shopping perspective, buying perspective, decision makers who have never not had the internet. Like, can you imagine at 4 years old being like, I want to watch whatever you want to watch and just having complete free reign to it, right? Like my parents still talk about when TV cut off, like at 10 o'clock, there's just no more television.
Yeah.
So we're talking about an audience who's constantly inundated with more signals, more buying decisions, more purchase options, and they're looking at not only the brand itself, but everything around it, right? They're constantly given a signal of like, oh, we want to buy this, but now I need to look at an influencer to see what they have to say, talk to friends, watch reviews on it, like all these different things that they have access to that didn't exist as much even 15, 20 years ago.
Right. Yeah. I mean, I there's no arguing that. So like, I feel like that's valid. And I understand the idea of this like ongoing process that never ends. And that's, of course, the argument against the funnel is like, it's this like, beginning, middle, end, and then it's done. I think I believe that the validity of the funnel is just from the perspective of like you just describing what you just described as like chaos, basically, which is totally fine. Like that is how the world works.
Yeah.
But when it comes to talking to a client about how the world works and being like, okay, now sit there and we're going to sit here and visualize chaos for a second. And then I'm going to try to explain every touch point that's going to happen in this chaotic like adventure that is the Gen Z buying environment. I just don't see that as like, it exists, and I'm not arguing it doesn't exist, but from the perspective of like how there's still this awareness piece and there's still the nurturing piece, and the nurturing piece looks different. It's not just like how they interact with us, but it's like what the influencer said about this brand or what reviews were written about it or any of 100 other things. So like the pieces of the funnel are different, and I get that, and I've heard people call it a leaky funnel.
Yeah.
But from the perspective of just like how to logically put together a game plan, like I just think that when I'm talking to somebody and trying to explain like, hey, this falls into this category or this per prospecting like piece of this, like that's where I feel like when we talk about a linear progression, because then if you do take that chaos and then look at the user journey on that single line that they experience as an individual, it'll look like a funnel. So.
Yeah, I think like not that there's anything wrong with the funnel. I think it's like again, it's linear, so it's the most simple thing to understand, which is ultimately what you're trying to get to. Even within all that chaos, you're trying to simplify everything. I think one of the things I like about the loops and the flywheels is that it comes back at a point. Like the funnel is like, hey, congratulations, we got a customer, now we're moving on.
Right.
All of those have like a lifetime value aspect to it. It has either a referral, loyalty program, or newsletter, something that keeps you attached to that person,
right?
Outside of just that initial purchase. And you can do it for any number of businesses, right? Like e-commerce, automotive, big purchases. Hey, congratulations, we sold you a car. Now you got to come in for service. Now you have to come in to, if it was a lease, like we're going to give you another one.
Right.
Or it's been 6 years, like, do you still want this car? We still have more.
Right.
So, you can go for really anything B2B. But I think that's one of the things that I think the funnel missed because they didn't have to. I don't think they had to do it as much. I don't think there was quite as much competition for our eyeballs in space.
Sure.
You still had a bunch of brands and everything, but now there's not even brand. People are more brand agnostic. It's like,
Yeah.
hey, where can I find a cheaper version of this exact product that I just found out about?
Yeah.
We have that blog that talks about dupes from Amazon because people
Right.
are looking for the cheaper version of the nice thing that they know is basically the same quality, but 80% cheaper.
Right. Yeah. And you're right. I think I do look at it like a lot of funnels and not just like a single one. And I think that's where you do, not that I'm changing my argument, but I do see the value in like when you're discussing the need for, that referral program that's going to drive the next like piece of the funnel, if you will, or the next piece of the of growth for the company. Like I do see why, at least considering all those other pieces is important. But I think, and I do think that if you are narrowly thinking about the funnel in the traditional way, like you are missing a ton of stuff. So it's not so much that. I just think that, back to that just ease of explanation and thinking through. It's like, it's really about thinking through, like go through that journey. Like, what does that look like? Like, you just gave a bunch of examples, but I think that is like the, which portion is, how does awareness look? Like it isn't about just like, we're doing a bunch of billboards now. Like it is like word of mouth. It is like what this influencer talked about. It is like in this movie that you saw or whatever it is, right? Like that might be that initial awareness or some, dupe lighting article, these kind of things. So, that does look like totally different than probably from a traditional sense. But then, you walk through that, like at the end of the day, like what was the source of the buying decision? Or what was the tools they used? And so some of that, I think AI is such a huge portion of it now too. Like I know I ask AI everything. So it's, I think there's the influences are shifting, and depending on the generation that you're talking about, the influencers are shifting, and it's a good point. Although, my son's a Gen Zer, so there's some part of me that's like, I don't know if like the influencers are always the person to look out for.
For sure.
It's just like we're sitting here talking. I mean, we could talk about anything. I mean, we could get into why you got to change out your car before you get to that timing belt maintenance, right? Like, but that's not what we're here for. So, but that's where I kind of feel. As we talk about the funnel and the flywheel and the growth loop and all those different ideas, I think I don't think it's unimportant. I don't think that when it comes to burning it down, like I think that for most people that we talk to, like that aren't marketing folks, like I just feel like you can describe that chaos for a minute just to kind of let them know there's a lot to do, but then when you get into actual talking about it, I feel like a flywheel or a loop or whatever is just slightly less obvious. Like there's some amount of like understanding to it, but it's not quite as, I think when user journeys, I mean, that's what it comes down to. Like if I think of a journey, it's like a point A to point B at some point. And granted, that journey may look completely different depending on who you are, but it's still at the end of the day, it's a journey.
It's still life, right?
There's still a path.
Even if you go forward, like time's still moving, or even if you go backwards, time's still moving forward. So at some point, you're going in that direction. I think that's a good point because like there's so much out there, but if you really start to think about it and you start to break it down, there's a lot more user generated content. Sure, like that's something that's been very different. Before you had reviews, 30 years ago, you may have had reviews, but they were probably, you were looking at like a JD Power and Associates or something. If we go back to cars, like you're getting your reviews from one source because they didn't exist everywhere.
Right.
Now there's, more user generated content. If you are buying any type of product, there's a Google review, there's Yelp, there's, anything that you want to see.
Yeah.
But I think when you look at the internet and its vastness, from a marketing standpoint, there's really only about 10 to 12 sites that we know are driving a ton of eyeballs.
Yep.
You've got Google and all of its properties. So, take YouTube, you've got Maps and everything else that comes with Google Waze technically.
Yeah.
And then you have Meta, you've got Facebook, WhatsApp, Instagram, you've got TikTok, you've got a handful of others, Amazon out there. But like when you're talking about purchases, it's not a huge pool. People spend for as vast and as number of millions of websites that exist. I probably look at on a given day or in a given year,
Yeah.
65, 70. Like
Right,
I'm not
right.
looking at the entire internet.
Sure.
So
Reddit is another one that I was thinking about. Yeah.
like,
That's
you're
lot
getting millions and millions and millions of hits.
Yep.
And there are a bunch of sites getting millions of hits, but that doesn't mean it's all the same. It's all different people.
Yep.
You've got a group hitting this website. So when you look at the customer journey, that is something that like people need to consider is like, you want to be on a bunch of websites, but which ones really make sense for you?
Yeah.
It's the same with like, if we're talking about CTV, like there's a streaming service for everything, which is getting annoying because now you have to pay for
Yeah. Yeah. It's
three
more
times-
expensive
three
than
times
what
the cost
cable.
of-
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. It's like, remember when cable was the thing that was expensive?
Yeah, and
Yep.
now it's you've got what YouTube TV or Hulu for your live TV, but it's like now I'm missing out on HBO and Stars
Yeah.
and
I know. I think
need
our
this-
bundle is like Disney, Hulu, HBO, ESPN. They're
Yeah.
all like in the same team now. So
yeah. I hope my parents don't watch this, but your children have secretly been hoping you don't cancel your DirecTV subscription, so that we can
Nice.
keep using HBO and a few other things that
Right.
come with the DirecTV subscription. So
Nice.
sorry, Dad.
hopefully DirecTV doesn't see this.
Yeah, hopefully DirecTV doesn't see this either.
I know. That reminds me. My dad pinged me to relog into YouTube TV. So we got to do that.
Yeah, I mean, I think the idea is to simplify. Like when you're discussing whether it's traditional funnel, the flywheel, loops, or any other types of ways you want to diagram it, the idea is to simplify so that you can create a better marketing strategy.
Yeah, and that's a good point because I think like what's the point of this argument? Like what what does that mean that you do? But I do think like what you're talking about is important. Is like there's only so much time and money depending. Of course, unless you just are a giant, then you obviously have boatloads of both because you have enough labor and enough money to pay for whatever you need. But when it comes to most of the businesses that we work with, like there's only so much time and money and effort in the marketing space. So like thinking about which users and which journey and which things are going to have the lowest customer acquisition cost with the highest lifetime value is kind of the important piece of that. And that's where I think the value of the flywheel or the growth loop and those kind of things was just looking at, instead of getting overly focused on a specific user journey that led to a conversion, that led to a sale of some sort, that you do start to look at that awareness play slightly differently. Like it may make more sense for you to focus on some referral program or your reviews or looking at influencers to talk about your product more so than some of the other more traditional things might be. And I think that, when it's a loop, you can kind of pick it up wherever you want. It's less about, how does it start to how does it end? It's more from, what do we want the journey to look like from any one of those positions? And then you can kind of more approach it with a better perspective, I guess.
Yeah.
And I think from some of the stuff you were talking about is that ongoing piece. Like a lot of that LTV aspect of a customer is like really based on the ongoing engagement. So it's less about that initial, capture of the market and nurture and conversion. It's more about the post-conversion.
Right.
What does that look like? Obviously avoiding churn or avoiding loss of brand loyalty and things like that. So how do you continue to keep the people that you already have? And so I think that is lacking in the funnel when we're talking about, what that looks like. And of course, I think it does depend on, what people are, what are you selling?
Right.
What is it? Like, if you have one product and it lasts infinite amount of time, like it probably doesn't matter as much. But then still, like from the perspective of referrals and ongoing, like having those influencers or evangelists of your product. Like obviously it's important to keep them people happy, to keep other people interested. So
Yeah.
I think that all makes sense.
Yeah, I think like when you were mentioning, you know, you don't want people to churn. You focus on lifetime value. It's interesting in the loop kind of context of things is that it's less about moving people down the funnel because then you're giving them slightly different messaging, right?
Mm-hmm.
Hey, awareness. Everybody just needs to hear us, needs to know who we are. You get to intent and consideration. Now you're trying to organize them a little bit more. Where with some of the loops and flywheels, a lot of it is more about positive interaction. Like, hey, we just want you to know that we have your best benefit and this is what we do. This is our service, this is our product, this is whatever. Because you need them to keep coming back, right? Like, you
Right.
know it's chaos everywhere, but you don't know how they'll come back. They may see what you have and like, oh, that, you know, I remember that commercial. Like, that
Yeah.
was cool and interesting. But they look for a dupe and they're like, oh, we want a cheaper version or we want whatever. And when they're looking at the competitor stuff, it doesn't make them feel the same way. Like, the interaction isn't as good. So now they're like, oh, well, I remember this one brand or this one product. I'm going to now come back to that. And every time they interact with you, like, it's positive. I think that is not necessarily missing from like the funnel idea or from like the traditional funnel. I think it's just more discussed when we talk about like the flywheel.
Yep.
And I think that's really the biggest difference is like, how do you position it? The funnel has all the traditional, and it's been around for so much longer. Like,
Oh yeah.
you know, you can study it.
I looked that up. It was like 1898 or
Yeah, like it's been around for forever. The concept of it, it's been through countless studies. It has all the academia behind it.
Yeah.
Now you're starting to move things, and so there's some academia behind these other ideas, but they're so much newer that, you know, people are still trying to figure out what do they mean as much and how can they implement them.
Yeah.
And I think that's kind of hopefully where we come in.
Yeah.
Is, you know, helping people to understand how to implement, whether it's on their own or just, you know, they need to consult with somebody or they need somebody to take it over or whatever. That's the part they need to understand is like, how do they simplify all the things that we've just talked about?
Sure. Well, that makes sense. I think something that I heard at a conference the other day, this woman mentioned that her daughter searches TikTok for answers, which
Great campaign.
blew my mind.
That the TikTok told me, or TikTok helped me, like that campaign. Do you
yeah.
remember that?
No, I don't remember the campaign, but
It's
I was
fantastic because
Yeah.
it's like,
I was just, but like, okay. So to me, like, we have to be aware of that, but there's a big part of me that's like, wow, like there's a bunch of bad decisions just happening via TikTok
well, yeah.
messaging.
I mean, as we get more into it, and there's commercials about it for sure. I mean, before TikTok, it was like YouTube. People would, I mean, YouTube's basically just YouTube and TikTok are just search engines that
Sure.
provide video. But now we have it with the Meta campaigns, right?
Yeah.
Like, hey Meta, like, tell me how to do this, or like, how do you fix this? I love the portion where the dad is setting up the basketball rim.
I haven't
He's
seen
like,
this one.
he's like, go back a step. And it's like, going back to step 3. He's like, we're only on step 3. And he's out at like 11 o'clock at night trying to put together his basketball hoop for his kid.
That's awesome.
And I can just remember my dad doing now he's very good at building stuff. So, but like, you know, it was
No, I get it.
9:30, pitch black. He's out there with like a spotlight
Yeah.
and putting up a rim for a surprise.
Yeah. No, that's I can relate to that for sure. Being outside and the step 3 is legit.
Yeah.
I think anybody who's gotten a piece of furniture from IKEA
Yes.
also recognizes like the oh man, and of course after you've done it at least one time wrong, then you kind of you can be.
And that's kind of, I think, where like with the TikTok and the AI, like AI is still learning, and it's learning from all different sources.
Yep.
So some of which are right. So you may be like, wait, this doesn't make sense.
yeah,
But yeah, so lots of opportunity for great success and potential failure.
yeah. Well, and yeah, I think the weight of influence obviously is such a big deal, and it's probably, you know, I'm scoffing at the TikTok search, but you know, I'm sure people that I follow and listen
Yeah.
to also are on there, but I I haven't had the same success, I think, in like getting valuable content. You
Yeah.
just get a mix, and whatever's popular is what seems to be the thing, that it's going to serve first, which is not necessarily valuable, but except for the entertainment value of it, for
Yeah.
sure. But I think that's that's important for everybody to understand and know, and then obviously take advantage of when it comes to that stuff. And working with those companies that are marketing their own thing is, that is in and of itself its own indicator of what we need to be doing. But then you look at that's a successful campaign, and obviously TikTok's blowing up.
Yeah.
Because we didn't talk about this before we started, because we're just talking about the loop and the funnel. But what do you think is when people leave the episode of this podcast or whatever, what's the
takeaway?
What's the takeaway? Yeah, what did you want to leave them with? Because I didn't think about that part of it. I was just wanted to debate. But then, once we debate, they could figure, what do you think? But ultimately, I think both of the points are valid, so it's not really a debate as much.
I think the takeaway, hopefully, is that whether it's whatever the path you take, however you decide to define your path, you have to think about all of the possible interactions that somebody is going to have with your business or brand.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's the big takeaway for me is you have to craft every interaction with a purpose, and all of those should work together and feel connected, but they all should have some type of purpose.
Right.
When somebody's reading your reviews, that, the tone that you respond to reviews with shouldn't sound vastly different than the website. Shouldn't sound vastly different than, your blog. Shouldn't sound way different than social media. It doesn't need to be the exact same wording, but it shouldn't be very formal when you respond to, a review. Thank you for thank you for your review. We look forward to having you as a customer for life or something like that. And then the website is what's up, buddy? It shouldn't be two completely different sides of the coin.
Sure.
But I don't know that that's always thought about, right? It's I just need to be here, be here, be here, and be here. And my message needs to connect with that person when they're there. But it can't be separate from the message that connects with them over here.
No, that makes sense. I think the point that you just made, I think the point about what's the value of the flywheel or the growth loop and thinking about it that way is really the message in all of that is every interaction matters.
Mm-hmm.
That's the summary of it. So if you get too narrowly focused on the idea of a funnel and this is the path that everybody takes and this is the only path that people take, then you're losing people all over the place.
Right.
Then the funnel is insanely leaky because you're just dropping people off wherever it falls.
You see it here, that means it must be awareness for you.
Yeah. So I think right. And I think that's probably that's not probably. I mean, I think that is a total valid point. And that's the thing that you really do have to continually be looking at every way that your business could touch a consumer, because it really is in thousands of ways. It's not the internet just makes it whatever it could be, it could be almost anywhere, on any channel, on any social media platform, on the lips of any person. You were talking about cars earlier. It made me think of the car mom who does I can't think of her name, but she does the car seats in the car,
Mm-hmm.
and then she sees what fits, and then can you put the stroller in the back, and what's a good, how many kids could you really fit in this car?
Yeah.
And I mean, she's crushing it, and definitely somebody that me and my wife are hey, what does she say about, which one's the right one to get in this model? So I think, you just don't, every one of those is a potential. And until it gets, if at some point it turns viral or gets big enough that you're aware of it, I mean, but that's where it's just everything that comes out of the, your office needs to whatever your office is, every single one of those things need to be thought of as a potential, opportunity for the next customer, or the lifetime value of a current customer is literally everything that you're doing is going to matter, whether it's, even these podcasts that we're going to try to
Yeah.
ongoing do.
It's like, oh, well, we've got a great close. Like, okay, well, you have to get them there.
Yeah, yeah.
And it's like, well, we've got a great opener. It's like, well, you have to do all the steps in between.
Yep, yep.
Yeah, I think that, I mean, not that the funnel suggests that you don't do those things, but
Sure.
it kind of suggests that, like, you're going to lose people, which you are either way.
Yeah, yeah.
But,
Yeah, but it definitely doesn't imply that, you know, where the thing that I don't know if it implies is like, you know, the next funnels below.
yeah,
You know what I mean? And that's like, I still think that it makes it easier to discuss with a client, but I think making some of these other points obviously would be more valuable with these other tools. But, you know, in my, you know, I think in my head the funnel looks more like, you know, string theory and a bunch of strings running around into like a with an endpoint that just seems that also is something to do with a part of the brand or a
Right.
customer. So I think of it more as a bunch of funnels, but I do get that idea, and yeah, I think it's valuable, especially with what you just said. Like it makes it, you know, whenever we talk about these things, like it makes me immediately start applying it to like brands that we have or our own brand of like, what do we do with that?
Yeah.
You know, like how do we look at what we're doing? So, no, it's cool. It's good.
Yeah.